All right, Jake Stuart here today, joined by Andy Burcham, the Alabama Sportscaster of the Year. Andy, I want to talk a little bit about your background. Obviously, you're the voice of the Auburn Tigers. Can you tell us a little bit about what got you into the industry, first off?
Well, it's something that I've wanted to do really since I was a child, Jake. I grew up near St. Louis, Missouri, and am old enough that when the Cardinals won the World Series in 1967, my father brought home the album of the highlights featuring two Hall of Fame broadcasters in Jack Buck and Harry Carey. And I grew up listening to that album. That was my team, and they were outstanding broadcasters. And I listened to that front, side, and back, and memorized a lot of it as a child, and really realized as a 8-year-old that's what I wanted to do for a living. And initially, I wanted to be the Cardinals play-by-play guy. That didn't quite work out for me, but it's really all that I've ever wanted to do, was to be a sportscaster and to be at arenas and stadiums and wherever to broadcast.
Well, you've been in this business a long time. Clearly, been really great at it, and this is your first award. What does this award mean to you, Andy?
It's a team award, Jake. It really is. I share it with the people that I work with at the Auburn Sports Network and our general manager, Ben Harling, certainly our producer, Brad Law, that I work with on football and basketball, and he and I are the baseball crew for Auburn University. And Brad does outstanding work, and I fully believe that one day he will be the Alabama Sportscaster of the Year. And then the crew that I work with for football, and then for basketball as well. So I get to work with some outstanding people. And first and foremost, I share this with my wife, who puts up with a crazy schedule that I have, who's also a big Auburn fan and understands the demands that comes with this job.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask you, you clearly covered a lot of pretty sweet events over the years. As an Auburn broadcaster and probably an Auburn fan as well, what would you say is the biggest event you covered, or the best event of your time?
Well, as part of the football crew, I'd have to say the national championship games that Auburn has been in. The one against Oregon, where Auburn won the national championship following the 2010 season. And in spite of the fact that it ended in heartbreaking fashion, the Rose Bowl game against Florida State, and getting to work a game in that historic venue was outstanding. My first 2 years broadcasting for Auburn, Jake, I was the women's play-by-play voice for 31 years. And the first 2 years, Auburn played for a national championship. It was the second and third of 3 straight years of playing in the national championship game. So that was my first 2 years at Auburn, was getting that opportunity to be a part of 2 outstanding Auburn basketball teams in SEC championships. The 1997 College World Series with the Auburn baseball team, and winning that regional at Florida State in such dramatic fashion are just a couple. And let me go back to my first year in full-time radio, 1983. I was in Bloomington, Illinois, and was broadcasting at Illinois State. And Illinois State played in the NCAA tournament that year in Lincoln, Nebraska. That was my first NCAA tournament basketball experience. And Illinois State beat Alabama in the first round.
Wow.
And lost to DePaul in the second round. Ray Meyer's last win as DePaul's head coach back in 1984. So that was a great thrill to be a part of that. And of course, I'm hoping as you and I talk right now that this Auburn team is in about a month is getting ready for another big NCAA tournament run.
Absolutely. I meant to ask you about that too. You guys came into the year, I want to say it was preseason 18, and now #1 in the country. What changed this year?
Well, I'm not sure anything changed. We knew coming into this season that this was an extraordinarily talented Auburn team, but it was also a new team, 4 new starters and 4 new players to Auburn, including Jabari Smith, who will be a lottery pick and may be the #1 pick in the upcoming NBA draft. And then Auburn brings in Walker Kessler, who played at North Carolina last year from Noonan, Georgia, a 7'1" center that right now is the best shot blocker in the country. And then 3 guards, Katie Johnson out of Georgia, who played last year at Georgia, Zep Jasper from the College of Charleston, and Wendell Green Jr., who's right now the SEC Player of the Week, who came to Auburn from Eastern Kentucky. And then you had the guys that were coming back from last season. So the key was, with all of this talent, how would Bruce Pearl get this team to mesh? And he's done an extraordinary job of doing that. This team has one loss as it gets ready to play Arkansas tonight in Fayetteville. I'm talking to you from Fayetteville, Arkansas, where it will be a packed house, maybe the toughest game that Auburn has played thus far this season. And the only loss is to UConn in double overtime at a tournament in the Bahamas back in November. So this has been an extraordinary year for this Auburn team. A lot of basketball to be played, basically the second half of the Southeastern Conference schedule, and then, of course, the postseason. But it has been a truly remarkable team to be around and to be calling this season.
I'm sure. Well, I assume since you're doing so many different sports for Auburn, you got to be a pretty versatile guy. I wanted to ask you, what goes into your preparation before each game? Like, how much time do you spend, and what do you usually do?
Well, it depends on the sport, because football is such an enormous event. And that's really, I start prepping for football games 8 days in advance. I'll start working on my spotting boards for the second game, the next game coming up. And then really on Monday, when the new notes come out, the new stats are available, that's when I really begin in earnest working on that game for that week. For basketball, it's a couple times a week. So I try to work ahead. Yesterday, before we flew to Arkansas, I started working on the Texas A&M boards, and Auburn plays host to Texas A&M on Saturday. You just try to work ahead as much as possible. And baseball is completely different because, you don't even have a lineup until you get to the ballpark. Right. So there's a lot of prep that goes in before the game, maybe the days leading up to the game, but also just that prep work that goes into that game when you get to the ballpark. But I try to have as much of a routine as I can. And in addition to that, we cover all the sports at Auburn. I do interviews with every coach during their season every week, a podcast much like this, with all of the Olympic sports. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it is something that I truly love and have been doing that part, the Olympic coach interviews, for a long, long time, and much longer than I've been the voice of the Auburn Tigers.
Wow. Well, the last question I have for you today, Andy, is I wanted to ask, there's plenty of sportscasters, hopefully future sportscasters like me, that are tuning into this right now. I wanted to ask, what advice do you have for people hopefully going down your path someday?
Here's a couple things. Be willing to do things that allows you to be that sportscaster, whether it's like myself, to do the games that I get to do, football, men's basketball, and baseball now for Auburn. And I've done women's basketball in the past. I've done soccer on radio. I've done soccer on TV, in spite of the fact that I never played the game, but I've certainly come to appreciate the talent that goes into that. But, until the last 5 years, I was working at radio stations in Bloomington, Illinois, Carbondale, Illinois, and then Auburn, Opelika, Alabama since 1988, doing a variety of things, including morning shows, station manager, news and sports director, disc jockey work, production work, a little bit of sales. Not very good at the sales part of it, but was willing to do what I could. And that allowed me to do the women's basketball games for 31 years and baseball now for 28 years. And a lot of that work isn't a lot of fun. There's not a lot of money that goes into it, but it allowed me to do the passion work that I do as far as covering the games. And for some folks, it may be getting their own talk show or something of that nature. My focus has always been the games themselves. I was talking with Dave Neal, who works for SEC Network and ESPN, before the Georgia game last Saturday. And we were just talking about, you're in the middle of a grind right now of the basketball season. It's a lot of travel. It's a lot of work on the road. And for him, every game is a road game, or he's
Right.
doing games from his house, as we've seen through the pandemic. And I said, the thing is, there's still a thrill when you sit down and you put on that headset to do that game. And that's always been my focus. And I've had to do a lot of different things that allowed me to do those games. And I would say this as well: you do those other things that may not be the most enjoyable parts of your job, but you do them to the very best of your ability, because that's what's expected. And sometimes they're not a lot of fun. Sometimes you're not getting paid a whole lot of money to do it. But for me, the key has always been do it at the very best that you can, because there's always someone out there, Jake, that would love to have the job that you have. Those times where you're frustrated with the job or frustrated with all the travel or whatever that goes into it, always remember there's somebody out there that would love to have the job that you have and value the job that you have and do the very best job of the job that you have.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. And it's something that we all need to hear a little bit more too, just realizing, sports is such a great field to work in, and we need to, appreciate that a little bit more and continue to work hard. Andy, thank you so much again for your time today. Andy's another state winner, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you this summer in Winston-Salem.
My pleasure, Jake. Look forward to seeing you.
Absolutely.